You imagine becoming wildly successful, being misunderstood, getting rejected, meeting someone new, losing someone you love, all before breakfast. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you catch yourself thinking, why do I do this so much? The strange part is, almost everyone imagines fake scenarios, but some people seem to live entire alternate lives inside their minds. Not because they can't tell fantasy from reality, but because their imagination quietly becomes a place where unfinished emotions go to wait. At first, it feels harmless. You picture conversations before they happen. You rehearse what you'll say. You imagine every possible outcome. Sometimes, you even feel the emotions before anything has actually occurred. Relief, embarrassment, pride, fear. It's almost like your brain is trying to experience tomorrow, today. But here's where it gets interesting. Psychologists have long known that the brain often uses imagination as a kind of mental simulation. Instead of learning only through experience, we also learn by imagining experience. Think about how athletes mentally rehearse movements before a competition, or how someone preparing for a difficult conversation quietly practices it while driving home. Imagination isn't the problem. It's one of the mind's greatest tools. The question is why some imagined worlds become so detailed and so difficult to leave. Sometimes it's because uncertainty is uncomfortable. When life feels unpredictable, the mind starts building possibilities. What if this happens? What if they say this? What if everything finally works out? Each scenario feels like preparation, but preparation can slowly become occupation. Instead of helping you face reality, your imagination begins replacing it, and this is where things get complicated. Not every fake scenario comes from anxiety. Some come from longing. Maybe you imagine finally being appreciated because you've spent years feeling invisible. Maybe you imagine reconnecting with someone because you never really got closure. Maybe you imagine becoming a completely different version of yourself. Not because you hate who you are, but because you're trying to picture who you could become. The fantasy isn't random. It usually points towards something emotionally unfinished. Here's the part nobody talks about. The most vivid imaginary conversations are often the ones where you're finally allowed to say what you couldn't say in real life. To defend yourself, to apologize, to ask the question you were too afraid to ask. Your mind creates a stage because the real moment has already passed, or it hasn't arrived yet. It's not lying to you, it's trying to process something that still feels unresolved. Of course, there's a cost. If every uncomfortable feeling gets redirected into imagined futures, real life can start feeling oddly flat. Reality rarely delivers perfectly written dialogue. People interrupt, plans fail, conversations end awkwardly. Real life is messy. Your imaginary world isn't. That's why it's so tempting to stay there just a little longer. But there's another layer. The people who imagine the most aren't always escaping reality. Sometimes they're deeply observant. They notice tiny expressions, small changes in tone, little details other people overlook. Their imagination simply has more raw material to work with. The same sensitivity that helps them empathize with others can also fuel endless what-if stories inside their own heads. It's both a gift and a burden. Because the richer your inner world becomes, the easier it is to mistake possibility for probability. The goal, then, isn't to stop imagining, it's to recognize what your imagination is trying to tell you. Every recurring daydream asks a quiet question. What are you hoping for? What are you afraid of? What conversation still needs to happen? What part of yourself is asking to be seen? When you become curious instead of ashamed, those imaginary stories stop feeling like wasted time. They become clues, not predictions, not prophecies, just clues. Maybe your mind isn't creating fake scenarios because it's broken. Maybe it's trying in its own imperfect way to finish emotional sentences that real life left unfinished. And perhaps the healthiest imagination isn't the one that builds perfect alternate worlds. It's the one that gently leads you back to this one, with a little more understanding, a little more courage, and the quiet realization that sometimes the stories we invent are simply lanterns, illuminating the parts of ourselves we've been walking past in the dark.